Hello, everybody. In less than 6 days, Serie A is back. In less than 6 days, Sampdoria Lazio, day one, Serie A debut for Lazio, and we have a special guest to talk about that. But first, this is Lazio Lounge, the one and only podcast about La Prima Squadra della Capitale, completely in English. And we have to give a shout out to our Patreon. Remember, you can support Lazio Lounge with our Patreon page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts from just $2 a month. So if you like the show and want to help us, you can join us on our Patreon page. Alistair McKenzie, Sampdoria Lazio, and you have a special guest with us to talk about this first match of the season for Lazio.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have got someone who might be familiar to anyone who listens to the Forza Italian football weekly podcast, which if you don't, you probably should, because it's a very good English language podcast about Italian football. So Vito Doria is joining us. And my first question, actually, Vito, is not a very football-related one, though. Is it a coincidence that your name is Vito Doria and you're a Sampdoria fan, or are these things connected?
I wouldn't say coincidental, but because my surname is in fact Doria, I do support Sampdoria for that reason. My dad is originally from Calabria in southern Italy, but the surname is of Genoese origins, and they were a prominent family in the Middle Ages in Genoa, and there were a lot of rich families there, even the Grimaldi family, who are now in Monaco. So there's a rich history with the Doria family, and the club name comes from Sampiedaranese, one of the districts, and Andrea Doria, who was a admiral in the 16th century, and he was a very historical figure. So many places and things, objects were named after him. And of course, there was the Andrea Doria Sports Club or Gymnastics Club, and then Sampdoria since 1946. So I think it's a very good connection there. Stands out.
That was a very comprehensive answer. I'm very impressed. I think we both want to, for our listeners, get a bit of insight into how Sampdoria have been getting on pre-season before this game. I think it's a very interesting opening game of the season for both teams in many ways. But you've had a coaching change over the summer. Sebo Di Francesco coming in and Marco Giampaolo going to Milan. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is basically what kind of changes has happened since that coaching change, what's the reaction been among the fans from that?
No, the impression that I get is that a lot of fans do have a good impression of Di Francesco, that they are happy with him, and they tend to believe in his way of doing things. I remember reading on social media that in some fan groups that although Giampaolo's sides played some excellent football, for some of them that was not enough. There needed to be more results or more ability to maintain results. But over the 3 years, Samp would get these good starts to the season and then drop off. Whereas with Di Francesco, not only do we have a coach that has a style of play now, but he is someone that has that experience in getting teams into European competition. So although on paper we'd be a mid-table squad, but we seem to be more than the sum of our parts in quite a few campaigns.
You mentioned there that Di Francesco brings a style of play with him, and I just wanted to ask how far along do you think you are in that process? There's obviously been quite a lot of coaching changes among the bigger teams in Serie A this season, and I think one of the things that we're quite happy about from a Lazio perspective is the stability that keeping Inzaghi has given us over the summer. But do you think that the start of the season has come at a time where the team has fully adapted to Di Francesco's style and his tactics?
I did listen to some of his comments after the latest victory over Crotone in the Coppa Italia yesterday, and although we had won that match 3-1, he was not overly impressed, and he was hoping for more improvement. He did see some positive signs, but there is time to obviously improve as the season progresses. I have to share his sentiments as well, because it is obviously early days, and Sampdoria being a selling club as such, I do think that it takes a lot of time for new players, especially ones from foreign leagues, or with due respect, also lower standard leagues than the Serie A. It would take them time to adapt to the technical as well as the tactical nature of Italian football. So I think it might take a bit of time, but with a coach like Di Francesco, I think the potential is there, because from what I've seen, we do have a few hidden gems that might pleasantly surprise Italian football viewers.
Vito, 2 questions from me. The first one, are you surprised that there are so many Italian newspapers praising Giampaolo as the new messiah now that he's a Milan coach? And are you scared that Di Francesco failed at Roma, or do you think that this would be a benefit for Sampdoria because he will be willing to improve?
I think that Di Francesco is a better fit for Sampdoria, and I reckon he looks willing to improve. Before I go back to Di Francesco, what I'll say about Giampaolo is that he hasn't coached in a Champions League fixture or a Europa League fixture before, so to go to a club with the rich history AC Milan has, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, especially from external pressures. So be more from the fans wanting to relive the glory days again than perhaps the board or the new owners. So I think it won't be easy for him. Whereas with Di Francesco, he took Roma to the semi-finals of the Champions League in the 2017-2018 season, and I think that Roma were looking promising back then, but I blame Monchi for his spendings in the 2018 summer transfer window, and that threw the team off balance. So, pardon me, that threw the team off balance, and I suppose with Roma being such a big city and a historical one, the fans just really want the team to be doing so well, and unfortunately for him, he got the sack, and now at Sampdoria, there won't be as much pressure, and Sampdoria fans are probably not as demanding as other cultural fans. So I reckon this might be an opportunity for Di Francesco to bring his strengths back to the exposure of the rest of Italian football.
Vito, talking about the match that is coming, Sampdoria-Lazio, one of the problems that Lazio had this summer was the defense. Lazio kept allowing the other team to score too easily. Do you think Sampdoria, now with Di Francesco, has the perfect weapons to score against Lazio and maybe take the 3 points this weekend?
I do think it's possible, but it's been quite a while since Sampdoria bet Lazio in Serie A, so I'm not going to the game with the greatest confidence. And like you gentlemen mentioned earlier, there is that stability at Lazio, so you are familiar with Inzaghi's tactics, and of course when the players are familiar with such methods, I think it's very beneficial to the way they play and how they are able to obtain results. From a Samp perspective, even if we discard the previous results against Lazio, I still think that with Di Francesco's attitude and his philosophy of football, especially before he went to Roma, I do believe that we can still attack Lazio and expose any defensive frailties that we see.
Just one final question from me. You mentioned before that Sampdoria are regarded as a selling club by many people, and again in the summer you've seen the likes of Dennis Praet and Joachim Andersen leaving the club. So I just wanted to ask who they've been replaced with, and when you talked about some perhaps surprise players breaking through, who should we be keeping an eye out for?
In terms of the Joachim Andersen role, his replacement has been Julian Chabot. He's a German defender that was bought from Groningen in the Dutch Eredivisie, and he's someone that might be of some interest or might be utilised a bit, but more than anything, the experience of Jason Murillo, he'll probably take the main centre-back role with Omar Colley. So a player with international experience with Colombia, and he has played in Serie A before with Inter, so I think he'll be one of the starting centre-backs. As for Pratt, I don't think we've replaced him with a midfielder of his certain characteristics, but there is another box-to-box midfielder called Morten Thorsby, who is a Norwegian international, and we signed him for free from Heerenveen, another player in the Dutch Eredivisie. So I think he's a player to look out for because he is, like I said, a box-to-box midfielder, but he's very good going forward. He's got good feet, and he knows how to find the goals. I've seen some footage from the pre-season, and he's got clean feet, and he's a good finisher too. So I think he's one player to look out for. Worst case scenario is that Cremonese want to take him on loan to Serie B, but I hope that doesn't happen because I think he can make an impact under Di Francesco. So hopefully he doesn't get sent on loan right away. And the other player to look out for is a guy who did score in the 3-1 win against Crotone in the Coppa Italia. His name is Gonzalo Maroni. He's an Argentine youngster, 19 years old. His natural position is the trequartista role, but he can play on the wings, and that's where Di Francesco is likely to utilise him this season. So he does admit that he models himself on Paulo Dybala from Juventus, and I do see some similarities, but I think he's already picked up some of the freakishness of Fabio Quagliarella. So I'm very curious to see how he develops as a player, and maybe he's another hidden gem for us, as well as another mercurial Argentinian talent that football fans can keep an eye on.
But he's the one who scored within 30 seconds of making his debut, is he?
Yes, that's the one.
Excellent. Well, just one final question. What's your prediction for the game on Sunday night then?
For the game on Sunday night, probably go for a 2-2 draw. A bit like the fixture in Rome, but maybe with not as much drama as that fixture from last season.
I try to forget that match, honestly.
Yeah, I really hoped we'd get through this podcast without you mentioning it. But
Vito, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure, and maybe we can talk again when Sampdoria will come to Rome and take on Lazio again. I hope you will be still available.
Nice, sounds good.
Thank you very much, Vito.
Nice. Thank you, Vittorio. Thank you, Alistair.
Go.
if you want to hear more from Vito, you can hear him talking pretty much every week, as far as I remember, on the Forza Italian Football podcast, which is a great show for English-speaking Calcio fans, and I think it runs throughout the season, and I even have occasional appearances on it as well. Right, Vittorio, let's get on to the season ahead, bit of a season preview. I think, before we get on to things that have been going on this week, I just wanted to take a bit of a chance, I suppose, to talk about the bigger picture, the season as a whole coming up, with some big questions. So the first one I was wanting to bring up, I suppose, is something that has kind of got people talking a little bit on social media as well, which is, what would be a success for Lazio this season?
Well, I think this is quite obvious, right? Reaching the Champions League spot, that would be a great success. going further with the Europe League, I don't want to say winning it, but reaching the quarterfinals, semi-final would be a great achievement. Coppa Italia, yeah, obviously winning it again would be amazing, but I would put that in third position. Obviously, big success would be reaching the Champions League spot, I think. Don't know if you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason I got thinking about this, Alexander Mikkelsen wrote into us saying, "What do you rate higher? Another Coppa Italia trophy, top 4 in Serie A, or to progress far in the Europa League?" He says, "I don't see us having the squad for all 3 competitions. So if you had to choose before the season, what would it be?" But yeah, I'm totally with you. I think it's about time we got in the Champions League.
Yeah,
we've close enough over the last few years, and I think the next step that needs to be taken is that one. I think it's a fundamental step for the development of the club, for moving up to the next rung of the ladder, I suppose, in the Italian football spectrum, and also obviously the financial benefits that come with it, the benefits in terms of attracting players and keeping players that come with that competition are massive. So for me, that really has to be the priority this season. And not only because of all those benefits I've just mentioned, but also because of the fact that I think there's a real chance this year, with the fact that so many clubs, in particular Milan under Giampaolo, who we've just been talking about, and Roma under Fonseca, they are going through transitions of their own, and Lazio's stability is an advantage in this Champions League race in that regard. So I think there's an opportunity here if we can actually hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think one thing really important compared to the past is that there are a lot of question marks both in Milan and Roma team, while usually the question mark was mainly in Lazio player. We're going to talk about Johnny, he's a question mark, Vavro as well. But if you go and compare Roma or Milan team to Lazio team, well, I don't think they are better than us this season. There are a lot of question mark in Roma team. Will Zaniolo repeat the last year performance? They sold the best player of last year in defense. They lost Manolas. Milan, it's a big question mark. I don't believe Giampaolo it's an improvement or that big improvement, and still the team has holes. So really, Lazio has a big chance. The problem is, season is going to start and Lazio has already Milinkovic, Savic and Lazzari out, which is not a promising start. But yeah, obviously I see Lazio fighting for the spot. But Alistair, I was watching, Rai put Lazio in 7th spot, Sky put it behind Milan, Roma and Inter at the same position of Atalanta. Are we getting things wrong, or do you think they're a little bit too pessimistic?
Well, this happens every season, though. You have to remember, I'd never really pay an awful lot of attention to the Italian media predictions of what's going to happen, because most people have their own agendas, and quite often it's just a kind of lineup of the top 6. But yeah, I don't see it that way. I certainly feel confident of finishing ahead of AC Milan this year. Roma are just unpredictable to me still. I think that they could still be a force. They could still have a very good season under Fonseca. I think a lot depends really with them, though, still on whether they can get a couple more bodies in before the end of the market. So the benefit we've got, I think, is that we do have that settledness. We've managed to keep the core of this team together. The starting 11 full strength that we've got is as good, if not better, than any of those direct rivals for these top 4 places. The problem is keeping them fit, and the problem is managing to rotate this team successfully to play in 3 competitions. If I had to sacrifice getting knocked out in the group stages of the Europa League in order to be fresh for the top 4 run-in, I would do that without a shadow of a doubt, because I don't think we're taking the Europa League seriously enough. I don't think there's enough commitment to that competition over the last few years, and without that commitment to the competition, there's not much point being in it. So, I think,
Alistair, I would say that if Milinkovic-Savic plays as Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto plays as Luis Alberto we saw 2 years ago, Lazio is the favorite for the 4th spot. But this is a big question mark. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly feel a lot more confident about those players playing at the best of their ability next season than I did this time last summer. With all the problems we were talking about in terms of Luis Alberto's injury problems that were very unclear, there wasn't much information about it, but we knew there was something up with him. Milinkovic-Savic obviously got extra time off after the World Cup and started the season very slowly as a result. This time around, obviously Milinkovic has picked up an injury. Thankfully not a major one, but it is frustrating to lose him for the start of the season. But I'm really looking at this squad and thinking it is in a better place than last season. I think that the depth still isn't big enough for me to really compete in 3 competitions, but a few critical areas have been addressed. I wrote a whole article last week about the fact that Lazio very intentionally targeted not only wing-backs, but wing-backs who can cross, and with bringing in Manuel Lazzari and Johnny, they've not only brought in 2 competitive wing-backs for those positions, but they brought in the guys who completed the most crosses in Serie A and La Liga last season. So those are guys who can contribute in an attacking sense way more than the combination of Marasic and Lulic managed to last season. On top of that, I'm expecting a good season from Correa. He's had his transition season. He finished the last one very strongly. I think him and Immobile can strike up a very dangerous partnership this season. And yeah, Alberto, I think, can really push on. So it comes back to the same thing we always talk about for me, which is the defence. I think that is going to be the make or break thing with this season of where Lazio end up, is how Inzaghi manages to set that defence up and if he can manage to close them off. Because I don't think we're going to have any issue scoring goals this season. So I don't know about you, but for me that is still the major concern and could be the difference between a successful season and an unsuccessful one.
I totally agree. Vavro is still a question mark. We saw in the friendly match struggles. It's not a surprise. We talked about it, but he need to be ready for the Liga, for the Serie A, and it's not easy because the start of the season is quite complicated for Lazio. And then you said it, one of the biggest problems is the depth, especially if Lazio wants to go deep in the Coppa Italia and Europe League. Then my concern is that we don't have enough body, especially in key position. Again, we have Oli Caicedo that can play instead of Ciro Immobile. We talked length about Caicedo replacing Ciro Immobile. We are looking now that we are struggling on the wingers, and if one of the starter defenders get injured, then who plays there? So I don't think no one will get signed this week for Lazio, and I think this is one of the problems. The biggest thing is, as you said, we had 2 problems: right wing, left wing, and I think we made the right signing there. But we could do a little bit more, and we could have a perfect team. Instead, again, we're gonna have to rely on Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto and Ciro Immobile playing at the top level to reach the 4th place. I think we could have done it, especially considering that we sold Pedro Neto and Bruno Giordano for 27 million euros. So we had money to spend still, but we didn't. And this is, again, the same problem we're doing every summer.
So one of the other questions I noted down on picking up on that point is, what do we still need to address before, well, I said before the season starts, but I suppose I can extend that to before the market closes. Because we've got 2 games before the market closes, obviously very important ones. And the search for a second striker is clearly what's dominating that. Do you think that's enough, though? For you, if we manage to bring in a striker of the quality of the players who are being talked about, we'll get onto that in a bit more detail later on, but if we manage to bring in one more striker, do you think that's enough?
Well, that would be a good step. Let's not forget that Lazio plan was to renew the contract of Caicedo, and this still didn't happen. So there could be surprise there. Obviously, if Caicedo leaves, Lazio need to buy 2 strikers, I think. My concern, again, is on the left side of the defense. Radu didn't play very well this summer, didn't play very well last year. It's true that Bastos and Ramos can play there, but probably, especially if we will be able to sell Wallace, maybe we will need another body there. I hope Armini will have a chance to play, but I don't know if he's ready for Serie A football.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about that a little bit last week, the depth in those positions being a concern, and especially the fact that a lot of these players as well are quite injury prone. If you think about Stefan Radu's injury history, it's not great. Luis Felipe is constantly having problems, and as it stands, there's not really going to be any option but to reintegrate Wallace, because if we can't find Wallace a new club, which hasn't been so easy so far, then he has to be a member of the squad. I don't think it makes any sense to be in another one of these positions where any players get frozen out of the team altogether. So then we more or less end up with the same issues of dependability from the likes of Wallace and Bastos that we had last season, and perhaps can throw Vavro's name into that as well if pre-season's anything to go by. But I think a lot is riding on Vavro settling a lot quicker than we're expecting him to. So yeah, I think we can just keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, for me, basically, in answer to that original question, I think the top four has to be the target for this season, and for me, I think we've got a good chance of getting there, hopefully.
Yes, I believe it, especially because, again, as I said at the beginning, Roma and Milan doesn't scare me that much. I think they will have problems this year. I don't know if Atalanta can replicate again what they did last year. Fiorentina is an interesting team, but I don't think it's that level yet. So yes, Lazio this year have a big chance. Obviously, they have to be a little bit more lucky, and they have to hope that the top players play as expected. And things didn't start well last year because Lazar is out, and he won't play against Sampdoria, nearly 100% sure, and there's a chance he will miss the derby. It's not a perfect way to start the season.
No, it's not. It was the news that none of us wanted to read over the weekend, especially given that it was a friendly match, a match against the Primavera team. And so I suppose of all the pre-season friendly games, that's the one where you don't expect any serious injury problems to be occurring. It sounds like his finger got trapped in the shirt of a player as he fell over and managed to break it. But the good news, I suppose, is that his operation today was a success and hopefully should reduce the recovery time a bit. So, I mean, early reports are saying that the derby is still possible for him if he wears a protective cover for it. But yeah, I mean, it's really, at this stage of the season and with the squad we've got at the moment, I'm not really sure this could have happened to a worse player. I don't know about you.
Obviously, because Marusic is out, so Lazio has no option there. The question mark is Inzaghi going to play Patrick there, or he's going to switch Lulic to the other side and play Johnny? Because at the moment, the replacement, who should be Adam Marusic, is injured too. So obviously he couldn't get another player, right? It has to be the only player where Lazio didn't have any option.
Yeah, well, Jerry Mancini wrote to us about this, saying with Lazio not being able to play the first game, who do you expect Inzaghi to replace him? My suggestion would be Patrick. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, like you said, Marusic, he's not featured in pre-season at all. I think he's been on his own individual training program recently and is getting towards reintegrating with the squad. But I would be amazed if he were to start any games. Start the Sampdoria game. So it has to be Patrick, really, simply because of a lack of options. The only other possibilities, perhaps moving Lulic to the right-hand side, which has been tried before, and having Johnny on the left. But then we've still got this ridiculous situation where Johnny's transfer has still not been made official because Malaga's president is still demanding 12 million euros for him. So it is a bit of a farcical position to end up in.
Yes, it's true that it appears that there has been a clause in Johnny's contract that he could get free of this contract and sign with which other team if Malaga didn't get promoted. So he should be free. I know Malaga is not willing to give the transfer, but Lazio can apply to FIFA to get it. So I think Lazio already did it and it's waiting for the FIFA to send them the transfer. I believe he's going to be able to play the first match, as he played already the friendly matches, so that shouldn't be a problem.
So with that considered, say we're assuming that Johnny is okay to play, would you go with Lulic on the right and Johnny on the left, or go with one of those two on the left and Patrick on the right?
I feel that Lulic is going to start on the left and Patrick is going to start on the right. I think the starting 11 against Sampdoria will be the starting 11 against Primavera friendly match last time, with obviously Lazzari out and Patrick there instead.
And Parolo in the place that Milinkovic would usually take.
Yeah, well, Milinkovic, I don't think he's ready for the debut with Sampdoria, so...
Yeah. No, it's a real shame because it wasn't that long ago we were talking about pre-season being one of the positives being the fact that there hasn't been too many serious injuries to contend with and a lot of players have had a good pre-season, but all of a sudden we're in a sort of injury crisis because it's all piling up in one position. So no, that's not been good, but I still think there's a strong team that can be put out there. I think it was bad news, but I don't think it's a real game changer. Something else it made me think of as well is that if you think back to the opening game of last season, we were actually in a not too dissimilar position and ended up, despite having this pile-up of left wing-backs with Lukaku and Dermisi and Lulic, we ended up starting Martin Cáceres at left wing-back against Napoli in the opening game of last season because of selection issues. And obviously we lost that game, but I don't think this is probably as bad well, it's not as difficult an opponent anyway, at least to start the season again.
And we had Badel playing instead of Leiva, and Badel just arrived to Lazio, so that was another problem. I hope it's not the same situation. Obviously, it's not Napoli, Sampdoria, so that's a better opponent for Lazio. But Alistair, it's unbelievable. This is the first official match of the season, and Lazio already have, I don't know how many players injured, because we don't talk too much, but what's happening to Proto? He didn't play a single minute in the friendly match this summer.
Well, he did against Primavera, interestingly. I think he played 45 minutes of that game. But, yeah, I mean... It's another strange one, you know. There are worse issues than your backup goalkeeper, I suppose. Not getting as many minutes as you want, but it's not great with Caicedo, Milinkovic, obviously Marasic, Lukaku, Luis Felipe, and add on to that, you know, Lucas and Strakosha are fit now, but they have had to get through their own problems this summer as well. So. That side of things hasn't been ideal preparation, I suppose.
No, absolutely. And the positive thing is Berisha's back. He also scored in the last friendly match, so that should be positive. And I'm really looking forward to see Berisha finally playing. I think this could be the breakout season for Berisha.
Well, I mean, he just has to get some games. He's clearly got ability, but he has so rarely had fitness while he's been at Lazio. And, I think for me as well, I just want to see a little bit more commitment from him. I don't always get the impression that he is ready to kind of sweat for the shirt kind of thing. He does seem like a little bit of a fair-weather player to me. But if that seems like an unfair judgment, I just want him to prove me wrong on the pitch, because he's not really done an awful lot in a Lazio shirt so far. he's not had loads of opportunities, granted, but at the same time, he had enough games last season to do something. And I think in many ways he's fortunate to still be at the club, given that there are the likes of Dermisi doesn't look like he is going to be given a second shot. Milan Badel wasn't given a second shot. So yeah, I think that it would be nice to see the Berisha that we thought we'd signed last summer, because I've said a few times before that I think players always deserve, if they're coming from foreign leagues, to have a season of transition before they can be truly judged. They deserve a second season, but I want to see him take his chances a lot more.
Yeah, we have to be honest and say that in some matches, I remember Parma-Lazio, he came in and played really well. We were hoping to see much more of that, but it didn't happen, even because he got injured very often. So I think he needs to adapt to Italian football, but he wasn't very lucky with injury as well. So I hope this year things will change. And, with this different Lazio type of way, the different way Lazio is playing this year looks a very offensive mind team. I think this could benefit Berisha, who is a very offensive mind player. So I hope this will help him.
Vittorio, we have some transfer news.
Yep. Go on.
Very exciting. Well, nothing's been made official yet, but some pretty reliable reports and the agent himself today confirming that Lazio have secured a deal for Partizan Belgrade's Strahinja Pavlovic, who, by all accounts, I had never heard of until a few days ago. I don't think many of us can claim to have. But this sounds quite interesting now. I've done a little bit of research into him, had a little read about him. 18-year-old defender, centre-back. He is clearly very highly rated in Serbia, and supposedly a lot of big teams have been circling around him. I saw Benfica, Juventus, Man City were some of the names that were coming up. And so, yeah, I mean, apparently Lazio have agreed to pay €5.5 million, give him a 5-year contract. But, and this is quite a big but, he will stay at Partizan on loan next season to continue his development there. Which, well, how do you feel about this? For me, on the one hand, I think it's probably the best decision for his development and in terms of allowing Lazio to get that deal done. It's probably a good compromise for the club to have struck. But on the other hand, given the defensive options we've got, it would have been quite nice to have a highly rated young talent coming in.
I don't know. The problem would be, would Inzaghi trust him to throw him in Serie A matches? We remember what happened with Pedro Neto, Bruno Jordao. I don't think so. And if I'm not wrong, he played only 10 matches last year. So I think he needs to play a little bit more. And so staying there on loan is great. So the question is, we needed someone ready now instead of in 1 year time. So maybe he's going to be a big talent who's going to help Lazio next year, but we needed help now. So on one hand, I'm happy because always signing young talent is always positive. But I think Lazio is in need of now players ready to play for Lazio, especially in defense. So yeah, I don't know what to make about this signing, honestly.
Yeah, and it's quite hard with ones like this where you can't, it's very hard to formulate a proper opinion about it without knowing an awful lot about the player. Like you said, I think he only broke into the Partizan first team this year, back in the January, the second half of the season. So I think even avid watchers of the Serbian league won't have seen a whole load of him because there's not been an awful lot to see. But yeah, I think, like you say, generally, when these kind of deals go ahead, I do feel like we can probably trust Iglitare's judgment. I think he's earned that by now. We can trust his judgment in terms of looking at these markets and identifying talent. I think on top of that, the fact that other big clubs, bigger clubs than Lazio, financially wise anyway, have been also having a look at him is a good sign. But who knows? I think we just have to put this one on ice for a little bit and focus on what we've got.
And Alistair, I have a question for you. We have Armini, that is very high rated. We have Ramos, that is still very young and has been called for the Brazilian Olympic team. We have Cipriano, that we signed this year and is going to play for the Lazio Primavera. We have Vavro, that we signed this year. Acerbi, that I think he still have a couple of years to play. I really don't think we need another central defender, especially if it's not coming this year but in the future, because I hope Armini next year will be in the first squad. Cipriano probably will be there as well. So, yeah, I was thinking Lazio would have need someone else, saying a different player. I don't know. What do you think?
For the future, you mean, or for immediate term?
Yeah, for the future.
Well, I think there's still lots of questions to be asked about whether Armini's going to be able to cut it at that level. That's by no means a certainty. I think it's always sensible to plan for the future, and that's not a position we're very well stocked in. So I think it is smart to look at bringing in players in that position. Yes, Vavro's young. We don't know how he's going to adapt, but beyond that, Radu's not getting any younger. Acerbi is, like you say, he's still got a few years left in him, but he's not a long-term solution. So yeah, I think it's a sensible idea to be targeting young players who can come in, especially in a system where 3 centre-backs are being used. I don't have any problem with it whatsoever, because if I'm totally honest, I'd like to see another centre-back come in right now. But yeah, we don't always get what we want. I mean, what I was going to move on to was that obviously the talk has been all about the striker search still. We talked a bit about Fernando Llorente last week. Can't really see that happening. If anything, the list is just getting out of control now. It's getting longer and longer every week. But one that I did want to ask you about, again, I can't offer any real insight into the player himself, but it just seemed a little bit more credible to me, is the Ahmed Hassan Kuka story. This is the guy who's called the Egyptian Zlatan, apparently, playing for Braga. We'll have to ask Rami, one of our Egyptian followers, about that. But this one sounds a bit more credible to me, simply because he has his contract is expiring next summer, so you would have thought that would help Lazio in negotiations without having to pay too high a fee. And on top of that, he is a Jorge Mendes client, which might help things along too. So it does seem a little bit more credible in terms of a deal Lazio might actually get done than Llorente has ever seen, considering the cost and the competition of that deal. But yeah, what he can really offer as a player, I don't know an awful lot about him. I know he spent last season on loan at Olympiacos. He got 15 goals in the Greek league, but what that tells you about how he'd do in Serie A, I don't really know.
And as I said before, I don't think Lazio will sign any striker if they don't sell Caicedo, so I don't think this happened. But Alistair, before we finish our podcast tonight, what do you think when you saw Pedro Neto scoring with Wolverhampton in Europa League?
I think I had to kind of close my eyes and rub them and open them again to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It was almost inevitable that this would happen, really, wasn't it? That as soon as he joins another club, he gets an opportunity and takes it. But no, I mean, I think you have to be happy for the guy. I think it's a waste of time for those two players to be getting shunted around clubs and not being given opportunities. So if he does manage to find a club, a place at Wolves where they're willing to actually use him and give him opportunities, then good luck to him, because that was never given to him at Lazio. And, it's very easy to blame Inzaghi for that, but then again, Inzaghi plays a 3-5-2. There was nowhere to put Pedro Neto in his system, really. And on top of that, he was a couple of years younger than he is now at Wolves, who do play with a system that can use wingers more frequently, I believe. So, yeah.
So, first of all, he did goal and assist. And second, Wolverhampton is playing with a 3-5-2. And Pedro Neto's playing near Cutrone. So, yeah, I blame Inzaghi. And obviously Mendes. Because I think this is what, from the beginning, Mendes said to Lazio, I'm going to give you the money for Keita and maybe even a little bit more, but you have to keep those two players for 2 years, and then I'm going to bring them somewhere else. And this is what happened, and this is why I believe Inzaghi didn't play them, because he knew that after 2 years, even if they were playing great football, they would have left, and Lazio could have done nothing. So, yeah, I'm really disappointed, and we're going to see what happened. I mean, they weren't playing against Real Madrid. They were playing against a very weak team. So we have to see what happens in the season. By the way, Bruno Jordão still didn't play a minute yet this season. So we're gonna see what happens.
Some things never change.
Even though Bruno Jordão at the end is the player that played more with Lazio than Pedro Neto. So it's funny. Alistair, do we have something else before we wrap it up?
One final thing. We have been asked for our predictions for Sunday. And we have been asked by... Give me 1 second. I know this question's come in, but I've temporarily lost it. Dave Danu. So you can go first.
Oh, thank you very much.
I need to think about it.
Yeah, I need to think about it too. Well, for once I want to be optimistic. 2-1 Lazio. Correa Immobile.
I'm going to go one notch more optimistic and say 3-1 Lazio. Bastos hat-trick.
Well, you know, Lazio's playing very well attacking now. We have to see the impact of not having Lazzari. But yeah, I think Lazio will score a lot of goals this season. The problem is see how many they will allow. Because the friendly match didn't go very well for Lazio so far.
We'd score even more goals if Bastos took his rightful place up front.
Maybe he's going to be the replacement of Ciro Immobile.
Who knows?
By
I
the
can only dream.
By the way, big celebration in Immobile's family this week, right, Alistair?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, congratulations to Big Ciro. He's had his third child. Just in time for the new season as well. I mean, that's a footballer's baby for you, isn't it? Just perfect timing. Well, I don't know if that's perfect timing or terrible timing if he's not going to get any sleep for the first few months of the season. But yeah, congratulations to Ciro.
Yeah, congrats, Ciro. You're nearly chasing me for numbers of kids.
Some way to go.
Yeah, still a long way to go. Alistair, thanks for joining me again in this podcast. We're going to talk again next Monday to talk about the first match of the season, the first official match of the season of Lazio, Sampdoria Lazio, and to talk about the upcoming derby. I'm still not ready for the derby. It's too early, man. I can't believe it. It's going to be so early to have the derby, and let's hope Lazzari will be back. Thanks everybody for listening, and remember, please, if you like the podcast, rate and review on Apple. You can find us on Spotify. Again, rate and review on Spreaker. And if you want to support the show, you can find us on patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts from $2, a month. So it's less than a coffee a month. So please, if you like the show, you can support us there. Thank you again, Alistair, for joining me, and we're going to talk again next week. Bye, guys.